G'day and welcome to the Hunters Campfire podcast. My name's Mark and along with good mate Ian, we're here to help with all things hunting. If you're looking to start but don't know where to begin, you want to make the most of your next trip away or even plan that hunt of a lifetime, we've got something for you. You'll find our podcasts on Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon and plenty of others. And if you want more, head over to our YouTube channel, the Hunters Campfire, where we have plenty of how-to and hunting videos along with the full video production of every podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and good hunting.
G'day, Ian here from the Hunters Campfire podcast, coming to you from the car. Trusty sidekick here, Missy. We're on our way to Severn State Forest. Hopefully, this will be our first live around a campfire podcast. This is quite interesting. Mark and Jono, who you might remember from one of our previous episodes, and his obsession with rocks, and I think another friend of theirs booked the park for a few days and they're out here chasing goats. So I'm on my way. Gave me a heads up I might be coming, and hopefully we'll share a meal around a campfire with them and have a bit of a conversation. So hopefully it's a bit of fun. We bought some new tech toys that allow us to take the podcast on the road. Try them out and just see how we go. So it should be a bit of fun. Hope you enjoy it. Chat to you. See ya. So, is yours working?
Testing.
Man, that dog is just going to destroy this whole studio.
Yeah.
You can see it happening.
Sit. Yep. Come on. Sit down. Sit. It's going okay, so since we've done the intro, to give everyone a picture of what's going on here, hang on, I can do this. It's recording. It says recording. Okay, so to give everyone a look, we're in camp.
We are.
It's dark. In the spirit of Hunters Campfire, over Jono's shoulder there's a campfire, but we're all hiding under here so that you can see our good looking faces because there's not enough light over there for video. And what we have here is the podcast machine. Yeah, look at that. Wires everywhere, a few beers, a few friends, and a dog that is really keen to walk through the middle of everything and mess it all up. So,
And I'm here too.
that's life in camp. Good to be here, fellas.
It's great to be here.
This is the first on-site Hunters Campfire podcast.
It is.
Which
It's
is
like those television series where they make enough money so they can do an outside broadcast eventually, like, they go to Hawaii or something like that.
Well, that didn't happen. We're at Severn, and unless you're making the money and not telling me about it, then
I think the money was already spent on the trip.
yeah, and the cables.
Yes.
Anyhow, so we're here. We're testing the gear out, and it's great. So it's working. So we should talk about something that's at least slightly interesting for now. And I think we've decided that we want to talk about gear, given the pants fail post that went up on Facebook earlier.
Yes, I think that would be a very good idea.
You want to talk to me about that?
I do, but it's kind of like I don't want to bring it out too early. It's like
Oh, it's the
That's
climax. Of the
right.
conversation.
Well, not climax, but it's like you got to get it right. So
Okay, well then, let's throw straight across to Jono, who people will remember from kicking rocks over.
That's correct.
The
Yes,
rock
from the
obsession.
Pilligo and the rocks.
Okay, so good to have you out here. This is your first hunt for the year.
First hunts for the year and first trip to Severn. So I was very intrigued by the podcast that you guys did. And obviously I've spoken to Mark on several occasions about coming out here, but I've actually never been. So today's first full day in Severn. Lived up to the hype, really, it has.
Except the animals.
Except the animals. So I was always told there are lots of goats in Severn. Haven't seen any yet. They're here. We know they're here, but we just got to find them. So conditions are tough. It's not too hot, which is good, thank God. But there's a lot of water on the ground. And there's some thick country with lots of burrs, as many of you would have seen on Facebook earlier today.
Well, there's a lesson. Now, if you listen to our previous podcast, and you have, haven't you?
I have. I've listened to all of them, yes.
You listened to the one where Jace took a new fella to Severn down into the southern block and turned him into a Sasquatch.
Yes.
Porcupine hybrid. And yet you let Mark take you to the same spot.
Well, just to clarify, no, he didn't allow Mark to take him to the same spot. Jono wanted to go down there.
What was the draw card for the
He's
bottom
crazy.
gnarly end of Severn?
Yeah, so look, I want to see everything that Severn's got. I'm not here for just to see the good parts. I want to see the bad parts and experience it. You've got to see it all, and I wanted to see what it was like down there. And I'm never one to shy away from a tough hunt. I like hunt to be a challenge. I don't want to drive around and shoot them from the truck. I want to, walk the Ks and put in the hard yards and find those animals. So we decided to hit the harder block today to really get the hard part out the way first. And it started off really well. There's some really good rock formations. We climbed up top, and I'm pretty sure we heard a goat bleat. We think we did. And we had to listen and stalk back up the rocks, but couldn't find them. And so we carried on, had a look around the dam, bit of sign, but not much, nothing fresh really. And then we ended up in the thick stuff. And that's where, the burrs ended up all over the pants on multiple occasions. But that's all part of the experience, and that's what keeps bringing us back every single time.
And what's normally a nice walk down the creek, once you get down onto that creek line, which used to be the border, the road side of that creek used to be all exclusion zone. Right?
Okay.
And then the other side of the creek was always open, and that's chopped and changed a few times. But a lot over the last sort of 6 years, the section from the road to the creek has been exclusion. And funnily enough, whenever you walk down that creek, the pigs jump up out of the creek and straight towards the road, so you can't hunt them anyway. So they were smart enough to do that. We've seen some nice pigs jump up out of there. You didn't get down to the bottom. Did you get down to any of the cascading water? Like there's some rock waterfalls and things down the bottom?
We saw the gorge, but we scooted around it, so we came out of it. So that significant creek line that runs through the southern block, we got down to, I suppose, a junction with one of the little drains that drain into it. And in all honesty, it was, pristine pig country. It was green as green can be. In the middle of the water, there was, a couple of well-established gums. Very, very pretty. Very, very, scenic. The grass, as I said, was green. There was water on the ground. The thing is, you would not have been able to see a pig in it unless you stepped on the pig.
Yeah, okay.
So it was certainly well worth the walk. And I actually thought, if you could get in there a little bit easier, that would be a great place to stake out. You would most definitely see something throughout the day down there. So it was certainly a tough walk, but it was worth it getting in there. The question was what was on the other side of it, and we decided not to answer that question. We decided to basically loop back out.
So I've just given Jono the map. Just give us a look where you went.
Yeah, so we dropped down. So where we are in camp at the moment, we're on sort of the highest point, up against the boundary fence at the top, and we dropped down. We stalked down to that first dam, and then we actually cut across the main track through the park, which divides north to south. We stalked up to that top dam, and then we dropped down from there, followed the high ground, and then we dropped down into those drainages, and we followed it down for probably a K maybe.
Where do you think you got down to?
we came down this drainage, this little tributary that comes down onto the main channel.
That's pretty
we
common.
kept going a little bit further, and we were aiming to go for the corner, but we cut it short by a couple hundred meters. So that was the goal, was to get down to the corner and avoid that really thick stuff down here that you told us about.
Yeah, this is pretty gnarly in here.
So we wanted to avoid that. So the goal was to get to the corner. We cut it short by a couple
This
hundred
corner
meters.
on the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you were going to run that again, I think the best part of the river, of the creek, starts here and goes down.
Yeah.
And this area over here in this high country here, there's lots of rock formations that you find goats go and hang out over there because they just don't get the pressure.
Yeah,
it's too hard to get
that creek line where it hits, almost where it hits the private land, it's almost like a delta there. It opens right up, and that's kind of where we were thinking of going, but we decided to not push all the way down there.
It
but
must be nice. Do you get any photos?
Got video.
Yeah, I've got some photos of the rocks and some of the...
I'd be just really interested to see how overgrown it is, because I hear about it all the time, but I just, because of that, I don't go down there anymore.
The way we used to approach it is actually go down through that really mongrel country to begin with and get to that delta area, start in that area. And then, but today the wind wasn't right, so the wind pushed us that way.
Yeah. And
the other thing is too, I tried very much to avoid that regrowth area, because I reckon once you're in that, you're not hunting anymore, you're just bashing. So it certainly wasn't a straight line. I just trying to keep picking lanes that you can actually see where you're going, because I know you kind of get in and go, okay, let's push through it, but when you're doing that, you're not hunting, you're just making noise. And
And there was just nothing in there. We didn't see anything, any game trails or anything through that thick stuff. It was just
there was a band of burr country, and I reckon not much was moving through that. There was not much game through it. Certainly nothing that was eating those things. They weren't topped or anything like that. They're all flowered. They weren't topped. There was no cut through. So I think most things are just avoiding it. And they can, because there's at the moment there's so much groundwater here and so much good pick.
Why would you? Yep. Okay. Well, at least you had a crack.
And that was
You're
it. It was good to
braver
see.
than most.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we went down that way today, was to, get the real hard block done first. And I know on the north side there's some real steep country, but we knew that was going to be a challenge. We knew it was going to be thick, rough stuff. So we thought, well, let's do that today and have a look. And if we get lucky, we get lucky. Unfortunately, we didn't. So, look, I'd love to explore further down, closer to that exclusion. And we'll save that for another trip, I think. But I think the plan for tomorrow is to spend a bit more time up on this north side, where there's a bit more good country, and we know there's animals here because you guys have seen lots and taken lots over the years. So hopefully tomorrow we have a bit more luck.
And certainly a lot of the listeners that have been following the Severn story have been sending in photos and sending in success stories, and there's been quite a bit of activity over the last couple of months.
This afternoon we went and had a look down that way, and there's been timber clearing for a couple of years in here. There's actually now, for when I was here a few years ago, there's places that were at the time very heavily wooded that are now quite clear. There's some nice new clear lanes. And there's one that basically it's about a 2k walk between the track and the main road. So I actually think with the wind being right, it would be interesting to move that, try some of those lanes as well. And of course there's the rock country around the other side. So there's still plenty to look at in the next couple of days.
Yeah, good. Righto. What's next on the list?
Well, look, we always get questions about gear, and we've put a couple of gear videos together, but why don't we use this as an opportunity to give some detail on gear?
Rightio. Top down or bottom up?
Okay, so I'll ask you, Ian, rifle.
So I'm not a massive... I'm a fan of rifles, don't get me wrong, but I'm not a gearhead when it comes to rifles, so I tend to follow the trends. I picked up a 270 with some advice from Peter Lurs way back in the day, and I used that for 15 years before it got full of gravel and crap because I didn't look after it very well. And eventually I dropped it and the scope died, so at that point I decided I was going to have a look at what else was around and sell a few different things, and I ended up with a Tikka T3X ultralight in 7mm Rim Mag, I wanted to go slightly bigger than what I had in the 270, just because I was focusing more on sambar, and expect to focus more on sambar. And yet it's overgunned for fallow and various other smaller deer, but it does the job. So I want one rifle to do everything, and then I can put more money into that and more effort into that. The other thing was I was on a trip overseas, and we had a guide come with us, mainly as a backstop, not as a guide to trot us around the mountains and point out all the deer, but just someone to make sure we didn't do anything really stupid and survived. A backstop in case we got in serious trouble, he could help us out. And he swore by the tikas, and he's a professional. He said, "Bang for buck." That's a good pun, that one, isn't it? Bang for buck. Bang for buck. It's he said he just can't go past them. Yes, you can buy some really nice expensive rifles that are definitely better quality, but for trotting them around the bush as much as he does, he just highly rated them for accuracy and durability. So that was good. And he spoke to us more about optics and projectiles that go in those rifles than the rifle itself. Funnily enough, when we spotted some deer on the opposite face while we were over there, would have been 350, 400 metres. He went to each one of us. What are you shooting and what's the projectile? What are you shooting and what's the projectile? Well, when I'm shooting a 270 and I've got Remington Corlocks, he said, well, you're not shooting. Went over to the next guy, what are you shooting? He goes, I've got Barnes, somethings, and I've got to set, you're up. And he selected the shooter based on the projectile and the rifle combination over anything else, because getting a Remington Corlock across two gullies at 400 metres, it just probably wasn't going to happen. But back to the rifle, that's what I ended up with, and I topped it with a Sig Sauer BDX combo, which is an auto ranging scope. It pairs to my rangefinder or a pair of binoculars if you get the right pairing, and Bluetooths to your phone so that you can load your bullet profile. So I can have a number of different bullet profiles ready to go. So I use a Hornady, a couple of different Hornady rounds, and I have two different rounds that I use, mainly because there was a shortage in the ELDXs. So I went to the SSTs because there was stock, and actually found out that they shot better, which was nice. But the app allows you to just load the profile that you're taking hunting with you that day, and it re-zeros and recalibrates your scope for you. And I like that as an idea because I do a lot of mentor hunting and taking people out for their first deer, and I just wanted something that was going to be quick to acquire at distance and not have to muck around with ballistics charts and things like that if something went slightly south. So yeah, that's me, and that's as much as I get into rifles.
Jono.
So I'm in agreement with you there, Ian. I've got a Tikka too, love it. I remember a few years ago, I was talking to a good friend of mine who was a deer stalker in the UK, and he said to me that a rifle is a tool, it's not something you look at. So get something that works and something that works well, and it'll never let you down.
I'm a true believer that it's not just a rifle, it's a walking stick, it's a shovel, it's an everything else to get you up a hill.
So for me, the Tikka, I've got a Tikka T3 and 308. I use the 308 for red deer, for fallow, for goats, for pigs. I've shot everything. I agree with, one rifle for everything. Get to know it, get to know what that bullet's doing, where it's going to go, what that bullet's going to do, what it's going to do on the animal. You can predict what it's going to do. So for me, the Tikka, absolute workhorse. I've got the T3 Lite, which is the older model before the T3X, but still awesome synthetic stock. It's nice and light. I can carry it all day on the hills, don't have to worry about it. And then from a scope perspective, I'm actually using a new scope on this trip. So I upgraded or replaced my Leopold with a Meopta Optica 6. I went for the European optics. I've used Swarovskis in the past, and I think the European optics are brilliant, but the budget didn't allow me to go for that, unfortunately. So I've heard some very, very good things about the Meopta, so I thought I'd give it a shot. And I haven't given it a shot yet. I'm still waiting to line up on an animal, but so far the glass looks good. It's very comfortable on the rifle. Eye relief's all good. From a bullet perspective, I'm using Remingtons on this trip. I usually use Federal, but short supply at the time, and the ones that were available were very expensive. I had some old Remingtons in the ammo box, and when I went to go zero the new scope, I thought, I'm just going to have a couple bangs with this just to get it close enough, and first shots that it was shooting on the money. So that's 168 grain that I'm shooting in the 308, and they're super accurate.
That'll take care of a goat.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully on red deer. So that's not the core locks. That's the premium bullet that they've got. So I haven't seen it, what it does on an animal yet. But hopefully tomorrow when we get a goat, we'll see what it does. But I'm pretty sure it'll knock them over.
Yeah, and look, honestly, in the 270, I was shooting Remington core locks for 10 years, and I went through a whole bunch of different rounds to see which round my rifle grouped best with, and those dirty old Remingtons did a good job. They were cheap, they did the job, and I was really only targeting fallow and goats and some reds, and I didn't have an issue with it because everything was under 150, everything was under 100 metres, to be honest, mostly. So it was never a drama. If I needed something with more performance, I was going to have to change.
Yeah.
But
and look, I think the 308's probably, or it can be a bit too much gun for some of those smaller fallow doe or a yearling or something like that you take. But I don't think you can ever have enough gun. I think if it knocks the animal over and expires it pretty quickly, I think no suffering. I think. And also bullet placement. If you get the bullet placement in the right place, you can minimise that meat damage and harvest as much of that meat as possible. But I'd rather have one bullet, one gun that I know can trust, than have 3 different guns and they shoot differently, and I've got to try and get used to it again on every trip. So that's my viewpoint on that.
Bit of a conundrum, that one, because if you're a new hunter, then that whole you can't have enough gun theory is good and bad. It's bad because people can develop a flinch quite easily.
Absolutely.
It's good because you're going to knock that thing off its feet so quickly.
I wouldn't buy a 308 as my first gun to go and learn with. I would have hoped that you'd done some 2.2 practice and maybe some smaller calibers. I learnt on 2.2s, and actually one of my first guns was the 270, and I started developing a flinch from it because they can kick a little bit for a first gun, and that's even with 130 grain bullets. So I had to sort of retrain myself. But I was fortunate in that I went to a 308 with a suppressor, which makes a big difference. Really reduces that recoil and lets you really dial in your shooting. Obviously they're not legal here, that was overseas, but that really helped me out train that flinch. So I agree. I think you shouldn't jump straight into a 308. I think that'll be a bit tricky.
Yeah, in the 270 and the 7mm on top of that, they're quite a bit bigger in projectile.
Absolutely.
So they can give you a boot. So it can be a drama. The plus side is, like you say, if you're going to hit it a little bit further back, you're still going to nail it. So when you get into your second rifle, you're probably choosing one that is more suited for the type of hunting you've decided you like. You might get into hunting to start with, and it's all just fun. Your mates have got a rifle, you go get a light. This is what I did. We all went out, had a great time. It was all nice and safe, but I came back. It's like, okay, I've got to get my Australian license because I really, really enjoyed that. But I never went back to that style of hunting. They had tags for roos. They went out to help farmers, and it was that type of spotlighting and shooting. And yes, there's an adrenaline rush, and it's great fun when you're a young fella and you're getting into it. But I really then honed in on the stalking and the deer, and that changed what I needed completely. So, where would you start, or where would you offer advice to someone who was starting? That needed a deer rifle.
We've been talking about this in the truck the last day, driving around, because I've got young kids and I want to get them shooting. So we've been sort of talking around those smaller calibers for teaching kids. Probably and we've been talking about the 243 is probably a good place to start. You can get some. I think any gun shop you can go to, you can buy 243 ammunition, and there's so many rifles out there. But there's some newer variants of that. You got the 7mm08, but for that one you really want to be reloading, so you can reload those lighter bullet weights. So if you're into reloading, or you're keen to get into reloading, perhaps look at something like that 7mm08, because you can use those lighter bullet weights and sort of download it a little bit, and then if you're going chasing some bigger stuff, you can put some heavier bullets and some bigger charges in there. So I'm considering either the 243, which would be a great little rifle for fallow, and even for goats. I still prefer a heavier bullet and a heavier caliber for the goats, because sometimes you're shooting through brush. Those 243s I think could probably deflect a little bit in some of the brush that you're shooting through. That little bit extra weight and momentum behind the 308 will probably help. But I think a 243 or a 7mm08 or something like that for a new shooter is a good place to start. Low recoil, gives you plenty of options, good availability of ammo, and you're not going to develop a flinch from those.
So look, I reckon there's a couple of different things here. One of them is if we're talking about young people, as in, teaching your kids to shoot, then a 22 or something like that makes perfect sense. The thing is, as an adult, I think there's a kind of a different approach here. Now, as an adult, if you want to hunt, then you got to realise you need to buy a hunting rifle. Buying a 223. I mean, again, of course, it depends on what you're going to hunt. But if you want to hunt medium to heavy game, so you want to hunt, deer, goats, and pigs, then you need a rifle that you can hunt deer, goat, and pig with. So I think that is also something that you got to factor in. So, like for my first rifle was an air rifle. My second rifle was a 30-30 because I wanted to hunt pigs. So I bought a 30-30.
That's what the magazines told you.
Well, I was a lefty and I couldn't get a left-hand bolt action rifle, so I bought lever action 30-30. And that's just kind of how I started. So I was 18 and I went away, and away I went. So I think that's a really important factor. I know there's an issue about the boot and things like that. And so to get around that, and we've said this around camp the last couple of days, is that if I started again, I think the 7mm08 would be a very, very good option for someone who's hunting. So it's their first rifle, but they actually want to hunt. Now, if you want to go to the range and shoot paper as your first rifle, buy a 223 or something like that. It'll give you, you'll have accuracy out to 300. You'll have accuracy out to the range at the range. You'll have lots and lots of fun. You can shoot lots and lots of different rounds, and you can learn about your rifle. But if you want to hunt, think about something that's going to kill effectively. So think about something like a 7mm08 or something like that. That would be my go.
So Andrew, who came with us out to the Pilliga, had spent quite a bit of time at the range with a 22 after he got his license. Decided he wanted to do this. Had a 2-year plan to get himself from getting a license to going hunting, and was roughly a couple of years, probably a bit under that. But he borrowed a 22, went to the range, spent a lot of time getting used to shooting, and then he upped himself to a 223 and spent a long time doing that, and that was great. And then ended up buying himself, I'm pretty sure it was a 308. But the comment, there's a couple of things that came out of that. He thought, the recoil's, it's pretty solid. But there's a difference between the recoil that you feel after you've shot 10 or 15 rounds or 20 rounds at the range, when you're shooting targets, compared to the recoil you feel when you shoot at an animal. In fact, you don't feel that at all. And I made that comment to him before we went hunting on his first hunting trip. I said, you're not gonna remember the recoil. You're probably not going to remember the sound. The sound he did remember was me shooting the second goat right next to him. He remembered that sound, but he didn't remember the sound of his own. So that recoil thing is, I don't know, I think you develop more of a flinch when you've got a powerful rifle at the range and you're shooting lots and lots of rounds. That's something that people need to consider.
I mean, that's the whole concept of felt recoil, I think that's really important. I mean, I got a 30-06. I don't like shooting that particularly much off the bench. After a while, it starts to annoy you, But out here, I don't even... Did I take a shot? Oh, yeah, I did. There it is, So I think that's really important, And I think that's where the flinch comes from, is the fact that you shoot something that you're unfamiliar with at the range and you shoot it 15, 20 times. So, you buy a box of ammo and you throw that box of ammo, it's starting to hurt,
I think even if you are familiar, it's, even if you're used to it, like I used to shoot competition shotgun and people think, 12 gauge shooting, those things can boot, but not like a 7mm. I could shoot a couple of hundred rounds of shotgun, on a weekend, no problem. I would never want to do that with a 7mm or a 308 or anything.
And like off a bench
off
too.
A bench, that's right. Yeah.
That's not a particularly comfortable position. And, again, you talk to bench press shooters, they spend a hell of a lot of time getting the right form off a bench. Most people don't even know what that form is. So you get on the bench, you put it on whatever your sandbags or whatever you got, then you try and kind of get behind it on that concrete bench with the windy up seat, and then you're hanging on to the thing, and it's not particularly pleasant.
No, and I mean, even to this day, when I go to the range, I spend more time shooting my 22 than I do shooting my 308, because at the end of the day, the 308 hurts, and when you're shooting 20 rounds, but the 22 doesn't. And I find it allows me to really practice, to dial in my technique on that 22. So I think what Andrew did is perfect, going from a 22 to a 223, really just showing that natural progression through. I think that's a really, really smart way of doing it, and having a plan, having a 2-year plan, saying I'm not just going to go out and hunt this week with my 308. When he had that plan, he had that progression. I think that's a really smart thing to do.
Yeah, look, it's certainly, well, having spoken to Andrew, it's the kind of thing he would do. But I mean, for a lot of us, we probably don't either have the planning capability or the patience, and so you kind of jump into it. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
No, but I think if we're, especially, you guys who are mentoring a lot of hunters, I think it's important to instill that from the beginning, saying, you need to have a plan, have a progression. Don't just go out there expecting to walk out with a 308 and shoot goats on the first day, because, you're going to get the shakes when game fever kicks in. I still get, the shakes sometimes to this day when I see an animal. I got a big stag staying in front of me, I start shaking. And, I've been hunting for over 20 years, so it can happen to the best of us. So if you're inexperienced and all of a sudden a big deer stands in front of you, or a big goat, and you're going to be shaken, and if you're already got a flinch anticipating that 308 kicking, it's going to be even worse, and you're going to miss that animal, or even worse, you're going to wound that animal. So I think practice with those smaller calibers, have a plan, progress. I think that's a really important piece for new shooters.
Certainly. I mean, again, knowing Andrew, or speaking to Andrew, that it is a well thought out and well considered approach. But I mean, if you wanted to have somewhere in between, think about that caliber and think about what you're going to do with that caliber. If you're gonna hunt deer and pig, there's options there that will get you in a position where you've got a comfortable rifle to shoot without necessarily developing a flinch. And I mean, some of the older calibers, they do, and again, also all the not the older calibers, but the development of the rifle in terms of its comfort. I've noticed that certainly more modern rifles or more modern design bolt actions are more comfortable to shoot. I kind of learn on a 30-30 with a timber stock, and to be honest, 20 shots on that on the bench, and you didn't have a flinch, you didn't have an arm that worked, so you kind of just.
But also, I think what you've said there is important, in that don't just choose a rifle, based on, don't just, we're saying Tikkas are good rifles. Don't just walk into the shop and buy a Tikka because we're saying they're good rifles. It might not fit you properly. Try the rifle, shoulder it. Make sure that it fits you properly, because not all stocks are the same shape and design, and it might not fit you properly, and that could affect you negatively when you come to shoot, because if the length of pull's not correct or whatever, that's going to hurt you. So shoulder as many rifles as you can. Don't just buy a Tikka because we say they're good rifles. Find one that fits you, and make it work for you.
I mean, that's it. I mean, that's my life. I own a Tikka. I bought it in 2008. It was a left-hand Tikka. It took a year to get into the country. At the time, it's not a T3X, it's T3, and other than the barrel and the action, there's nothing on that came from the factory, and that whole thing has been customized to suit me. And it's got an 1.5 inch extra in the stock to fit my frame. I've played around with different scopes on it. I think it's had about 4 different scopes over the time. It's gone through a number of iterations, and it's a fantastic rifle, both from appearance sake, but also from an operation sake, from a shooting, from a rifle sake. But it fits me like a glove, and that's a big thing, And there is, if you're listening to this and you haven't bought a rifle, there is a huge variance between brands. They're completely different. Tikka seem to be a little bit longer they have a longer pull than other. I know that, for instance, when the Browning X-Bolts first came out, I thought they were a great rifle. I really liked them until I picked one up and realised, it was significantly too short for me. Same with a lot of the other American rifles. Even the Scout, which is really a rifle I like a lot, it's short, but I accepted that because that's what it is. So there's a real variance in what you buy off the shelf. So getting to a shop that has a selection of rifles, as in brands, and picking them up and finding one that seems to feel a bit more natural to you or better fit is a really good place to start.
And the other thing as well is, if you're a member of the ADA or SSAA, when they've got, a range day or a shooting day, go down there and try some of the different rifles that the guys have got. I'm sure someone will let you have a shoot if you're a new shooter, and you can try all those different, those different rifles out, and find one that fits you nicely, and then you can go down to the shop as well. So that's always an option as well.
Agreed.
Okay, packs. Now, okay, let's give that some definition, because that's that can be a pack for a state forest hunt.
I'll start because I've got a bit of pack jealousy today.
I didn't bring mine.
So look, I've got and I'll say the brand. I've got a Hunters Element day pack that I've had for a number of years.
Which one?
I couldn't tell you which one.
How big is it?
It's quite a small one. I couldn't tell you the details offhand. I'd have to have a look. But it's quite a small pack. It's got enough space for a bladder. It's got 2 pouches in it. And it served me really well. I've used it in Nundle, I've used it in the Pilliga, I've used it now in Severn, I've used it on my red deer hunts, but I do feel I need something a little bit bigger just to put a bit more into it. It can be
I'm sure I know the one you've got.
And today I was walking behind Mark and I was having a look at his, and he's got on the outside, he's got space to put his sticks on that he can actually strap in, which this one doesn't. I've got to actually carry my sticks, which I don't usually mind because I use them for glassing. I rest my binos on them, but at times if I'm going up a big hill or something like that, it would be nice to strap something into the pack and maybe have a bit more for those longer days. So I had a little bit of pack jealousy today, but that's not taking anything away from that Hunters Element pack that I've got. It's been pretty awesome. It's helped me take a lot of animals. It's not something you can load up with any meat or anything like that, so it's not a carry-out pack, but for putting in your day essentials, you got your water bladder in there, keeping you hydrated, you got ammo loops. That's one of them.
The Veil? 15 litres, that's tiny.
Yeah, it's very small. It's just a day pack.
That's not a day pack, man. That's for carrying some water and an apple.
So it's
for Malibu Barbie. That's a Malibu Barbie.
Camo Barbie, yeah, right. Very good. That's that.
That's a day pack.
Fair enough.
2-hour pack.
Yep.
Smoko pack.
And then in front of that, I've got a bino harness which I use, which is also a Hunter's Element as well, which I find really, really useful. I've got space in there to put my binos, which gives me one-handed operation. I've got my wind checker. I've got a little pouch in there where I keep my game license and my gun license and all that on me at all times. It's I think a little bit of a bigger chest or bino rig would be quite useful, just to I've got a rangefinder which I can't put in there. Not that I use a rangefinder all that often, but it would be quite handy sometimes. But yeah, Mike, what pack are you running?
So I run it's the Kuiu. That's how you say it. So it's the Venture 2300. I think it is. Venture 2300 Kuiu.
So does that make that 230 litres?
I don't think it's 230 litres.
That's why I was asking.
I don't think it's 230 litres because that's like a reasonable sized kitchen fridge.
Well, you're chasing elk, man.
That's right. So why did I go that particular pack? So that pack's got lots of good features. For instance, it's slightly bigger. It's got it's an internal frame pack. The padding is very good. It's got good shoulder straps. Got a sternum strap. It's got hip belt. The hip belt's got pockets on both sides, zip pockets. The internal pocket is just one big pocket, so you can zip it right out. It's then got like a belly pocket on the front, which is a vertical one, which they say is designed to put a spotting scope in. It's got a top pocket and a few other bits and pieces, and there's a little pocket stashing inside. So it's got a space for a water bladder. It's got a good space for a water bladder. It's got a little hook inside, so you hook it up so it doesn't fall down. It's also, but probably the big selling point for that pack for me is that you can buy that pack in the same capacity in 2 sizes. So you can buy a big frame or a small frame version of that pack. And I've always suffered with day packs. It's either the shoulders or the hip belts. Just never both. I'm never going to get a pack that's a small pack that was long enough to fit. That one, I can do it. Because you can actually buy a bigger frame for that pack. Now, it's not part of the Kuiu interchangeable frame system. It's a standalone pack. They do have that very, very popular interchangeable frame system. That's the next level up. This is primarily designed, or I got it primarily to hunt state forests like this. You can carry an animal out with it. There's actually a bit of video of me carrying a red deer hind with mine. It's a bit, you got to lash things to the pack and carry things on the shoulder, but you can do it. On the chest rig side, it's a really good point Jono brought up about chest rigs, because if there's a piece of equipment that every hunter should have, I reckon it's a chest rig. And the reason I reckon you should have a chest rig is you don't glass anywhere as much without a chest rig.
That's
as soon
true.
as you have those binos on your chest, you start glassing more. You can't help but use your binos more because they're right there in front of you. I run the marsupial gear one. It's the older one. It's the very, very simple. It's just really one pouch. There's a zip on the front of it, which is almost useless. I mean, you could put something in there, I don't know what. It's got 2 little side pockets. One's got a wind checker in it. The other one doesn't have anything on it. And I got the extra pouch to put the rangefinder on it. So I run a rangefinder and just a simple pouch. Because for me, I actually didn't want a bigger chest rig. I just wanted something very, very simple. The way the I suppose the top flap works, it opens away from your chest, so you can quite comfortably walk around with it open. And it's got 2 safety straps that go on your binos, so if you drop them, they don't hit the ground. I find it's a really good system. And on the other side, I've got the little Havilon knife. So I've got the wind checker, the Havilon knife, and the rangefinder. And just to add that rangefinder, I used to have one of the top shelf loophole rangefinders with, the ballistic calculator and the dit and all that stuff. Sold it. Bought a Nikon ProStaff 1000. Hold it up, takes range. That's it.
Yeah, I think as long as the rangefinder can acquire in low light,
that's it. Bing.
That's fine.
That's all it does.
I borrowed one off someone, and he might feel sad that I say this, but I won't mention his name. And it was just a bit budget, and I tried to use it in low light to spot some goats, because I forgot my rangefinder and I was bow hunting. It's just like forgetting your bolt. And I borrowed his, and in low light it just couldn't acquire. It was So you get what you pay for. It may be good. I don't know. I don't know anything about it, but I think when buying hunting equipment, you're best off begging to borrow, trying as much stuff out as you possibly can, and then making a decision about what you want, because it's so easy to get sucked into the cheap stuff, so that you've got a bit of everything and really not have much of anything.
And that's a good point, especially with binos. If you're going to buy binoculars and you go to the shop, don't go outside with the salesperson in the middle of the day and say, look how good they are, look at that park bench at 500 metres. Because in middle of summer, outside, 2 cans with a bottle of glass on the some Coke bottle of glass on the bottom will look good at 500 metres. Yeah. You got to find a place that's dark.
There's some great brands.
Yeah.
Like you were saying before, you're using Myopta glass. A couple of guys that I know use Myopta. It's really good.
Yeah.
So they've moved on to Swaro. Sure, they can afford it now. That's great. But there's some other really good brands out there that do the same almost the same thing. And I know guys that have gone to the local gun shop, I need a pair of binoculars, and they get walked out the front, like you say, with a $2,500 pair of binoculars, when what they need is the $300 Vortex pair probably to start with. Now, that's not buying the cheapest ones. You can get way, way worse than those, and some of the Vortex stuff is pretty good for value for money. But try it out, I think, is important.
Yeah, I think when it comes to binos and looking at those cheap options, I've actually got quite a good story of how I ended up with mine. So I've got a pair of Swarovskis. I splashed out and bought them, and the reason for that was I was hunting in the UK, and I was sitting up in a half seat with it was a paid hunt, and he was guiding me, and we're sitting in a half seat, and I had a cheap pair of binos, a cheap pair of Bushnells, which is actually a pretty reputable brand. And we're sitting in the high seat, and he's nudging me, saying, pointing in the field, and I'm putting my binos up, and I can't see a single thing, and I'm shaking my hands like that. He takes off his binos, and he's got a pair of Swarovskis, and I put them up to my eyes, and there was 20 fallow in the field in front of me, and I couldn't see them through the Bushnells, and I could see them with the Swaros. So I went home and bought a pair of Swaros.
I said in another one of our podcasts, make sure you get binos that are suitable to your scope. Because it would suck to be able to see the deer that you can't see through your scope.
Yeah. So next story I've got is probably a year later. I was sitting in a half seat again, and put the binos up, and a seeker deer comes out, and I can see it. Right, it's a hunt. That's what I'm here to shoot. Lift up the scope. Couldn't see the deer through the scope.
Point in case.
And so I went home and ordered myself a Swarovski scope, which matched the binos, and I could see both at the same time. So,
probably wasn't where I was going with that, but yeah.
But that's where I went.
Got the point.
Because I got the point, and it worked after that. I mean, I just bought and the shooting that I was doing over there, I just bought a fixed magnification scope. I didn't need a variable. But you've got to buy, especially optics that are right for the type of hunting that you're doing. If you're shooting up close and personal here, like you asked quite often in the state forest, you don't want to go buy a 6-24 or something like that. It's probably not going to give you the best experience. You want a lower magnification.
I'm seriously considering for state forest the amount of game that I see up close, an aim point red dot or something. For samba as well, the amount of samba that I've seen on samba trips up close versus far away, they're all within meters. Same with a lot of the goats, a lot of the pigs, a lot of everything.
Well, I generally travel at 3 power.
Well, I'm wound as far down as I can.
Yeah, I'm usually somewhere between 2 and 3 on the scope for state forest, because it just helps you acquire so much easier.
For sure.
My scout rifle's it's a 1-6 on the scout rifle anyway, and it sits at 2 or 3 at the best. The Steiner, which is a cracking scope, it's a 2-10, and I think it's on 3 at the moment.
Yep.
And that's basically where it stays. And most of my scopes do that. And the only time I actually wind them up is when I go to the range.
Yeah, that's right. So hold that for a sec.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to packs, and then I want to come back to scopes, because I think there's a couple of things to cover on that. And I wanted to make a point about packs. There are lots of really good packs out in the market, and there are a lot of pack systems out there where you buy the frame, and then you buy the pack to go on the frame, and you get different size packs, and they're designed for hauling heavy weights of meat. Now, some people will argue with this comment, but very American way of doing it, because they have to take out all the meat, right? A lot of us, when we're hunting state forest, and this is not all of us, but a lot of us when we're hunting state forest are hunting within a reasonable range of a car, within a reasonable range of a track. You're not walking days out with meat on your back, or half a day out with meat on your back. It doesn't work that way usually. Now, there'll be some samba hunters out there that do it, but most samba hunters that are going for meat are probably hunting fringe country, which the same theory applies. They're going to be reasonably close, and they're pulling off the right parts of the meat, and they're bringing it back. They don't need those massive pack frame systems that some people buy because they're very well, marketed on YouTube and various things like that. So the type of packs that you guys have mentioned are well suited to state forest hunting in Australia. I dabble with all sorts of different stuff. I've got a Hunters Element Boundary Pack, which is a 35 litre, but more respectable than the 15 litre Barbie pack. But it was designed for me to be able to put all my normal stuff in it, cinch it up, and be able to put a couple of hind legs in it. You know, usually fallow. You can easily stick 2 fallow hind legs and backstraps in there, and off you go. You probably struggle to put 2 legs in there.
Oh yeah.
But I don't tend to choose a pack for day hunting that can carry a lot of meat. I carry other meat packing systems in my pack. So I carry a piece of webbing with carabiners on it, and I hook that through the hocks, and that goes over the back of my pack on the outside, and I carry that across my shoulders rather than trying to pack it inside the pack. So I'm trying to get, I've got a full day pack. If I'm going to range for a full day, stay out all day, potentially overnight, I use that 35 litre boundary pack. I use it in New Zealand. We carried a big red stag out, and I found that some of the stitching let go. Didn't fail me completely, but they were really good at taking it back and replacing it straight away. And I've had the replacement for 4 years, and it's been really good. So, you know, as a sort of mid-range quality pack, they do all right. If that's where you're starting, I think you're doing okay. I'm now trying to lighten the weight of everything that I carry, and on state forest hunts like here, I'm really, like, I've got a bladder pack, which I think is a Badlands pack, which is a bladder, and then it's got a little pocket at the bottom which I can whack a first aid kit in, and a knife, but not much else. So it's a bit, yeah, if you're going for a little hike with your family and you've got a bottle of water in there, that's okay, but it's not real, you know, it doesn't have a lot more room for anything else. So I've actually, I really like modular systems. When I was in the military, you have your webbing and you've got modular systems and all those sorts of things. So I run a chest rig, which has binos and the rangefinder. On the sides it has my radio and my GPS and my EPIRB. It's got a pocket underneath that I can stick a spare magazine for rounds, a couple of little hidden pockets for 3 emergency rounds and licenses and those sorts of things. It's pretty big. It's forget the name, Morocco 30 bino rig. I find it's probably slightly too big, but I haven't found anything mid-range to really replace it. Everything else is a little bit small. So I persevere with that, and it's fine. So I use that on the front that takes a lot of that heavy technical equipment that I really want fast access to. And I completely agree with your comments that I glass way more because it's right there. And I use it and put my elbows on it, and, you know, it steadies my glassing all the time, which is really good as well. But what I've recently done is I've taken that bladder pack that I've got, the Badlands one, and I've slung a Hunters Element bum bag under it. So they marketed a bum bag which has got 10 different pockets, so it can stash a whole bunch of stuff. So now I've got, you know, the water bladder, meat packing system, first aid kit, all my radio gear, and enough room for a couple of apples, an orange, some snacks, you know, whatever, and a bit more space. And I carry, you know, a meat bag and that sling for, and I've found that if someone could make a bit more of a, you know, a well-made modular system, I think that would be quite successful. But that's sort of what I'm doing.
Yeah, look, with the packs, I've got a meat hauler pack. It's an American one. It's the Outdoorsman's Spur 50, which is the smaller version. So it's external pack frame, so an external frame as opposed to internal frame, and the idea is you can detach the pack from the frame, you put the meat on the frame, and then you put the pack back on. Yeah. And that, as I said, it's a Spur 50, so it's a 50 litre, and that's my biggest, well, it's not the biggest pack, but it's the biggest I'll carry when I'm hunting, unless I'm going to be doing multi-day away. And I've got my old MacPack Ascent, which is a Mountaineers pack, and I think that's like a 75 litre. That's if I needed that stuff. But that's Spur 50. So generally for me, if I know I'm going to take a red deer, I take the Spur 50. If I'm doing state forest stuff, I take the little, the smaller QU pack, and that seems to work out pretty right. But you're right, you know, some of that modular system stuff, it's very good stuff.
Oh, it's great gear. Yeah.
It's great gear, but again, it's horses for courses. Is that what you need to be carrying? I find that, you know, I try to carry what's in my pack, I try to limit the weight of what's in my pack. So this year I'm running a different first aid kit. I've got various things that I keep trying to actually reduce the weight of what's in there. I don't know what's happening, but it seems that every year my pack seems to be getting heavier. So I'm trying to keep on working against that.
I was going to say that every year it feels heavier because you get another year older. But I'm the same. I used to carry a lot more stuff. I used to carry my jet boil, and food to cook, and I used to take my little coffee pot, and I used to take all sorts of different things. What else can you stick in your first aid kit? Oh yeah, everyone needs a little fishing rod, so you might as well stick that in there. Like when I started doing this, I packed everything, because it was fun and you could do all sorts of things. Now you're just stripping it out. I don't cook food on the hill. The only hot thing I will have on the hill, and I don't take a jet boil anymore. I take tiny little, what do they call them?
Fuel cell thing?
Yeah, little hexamine tablets. Don't mistake those for bloody fire starters from Bunnings, because they're not the same thing. But anyway, a little hexamine tablet. They're about that big, and it'll boil a little billy. It'll take you 10 minutes, but you're not in a hurry when you're in the bush, so it doesn't matter. It's great that jet boils boil things in 30 seconds, but I'm not in a hurry. I'm actually stopping for a rest, and I want a break. It can boil away for 10 minutes, but the little tablet will boil it, and it's minuscule. So if I want to boil, I can do it. But I usually take a little thermos so I can have a drip filter coffee now, and it's fine. It's what I do when I'm sitting on the hill. I just don't take all of that rubbish, and you just don't need it. What you find though is that you do need a pack when you start broadening your horizons. And if you're starting in Queensland and then venturing south with clubs into Samba country, you need space for raincoats and weather pants and survival kit, because shit gets hairy real fast down there, and you need to be able to pull that stuff out of your pack.
And that's exactly right. Look, if you're hunting a state forest in, New England in the summer, in non-alpine conditions, there's not a lot of gear that you need during the day other than stuff that'll, make you a bit comfortable. Like, for instance, if I'm here right now, I don't have a raincoat. I've got it's actually a ground sheet from a hammock system. But what it really is a 1.5 by 1.5 metre ground sheet. Super lightweight. It's about,
Heavy duty rubbish bag would do the job.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's about that big. It's just, I don't have to, it's just reusable.
Yep.
And if I get caught out, I can I can basically get under that.
Yep.
And weather out the problem.
Yeah, I got a $2 poncho from
that's
$2
it.
shop.
You can do that.
A poncho, just one of the hiking ones.
Yeah,
they fall down really, really small, and it's just
that's a raincoat for here, but if you're in alpine conditions or subalpine conditions, completely different thing. So I think that's important. But you've got to obviously pack to your conditions. But here, this morning it was, for Queenslanders, it was pretty cold here this morning. I had a lightweight fleece on, which is a bit odd for February, but anyway. But an hour later, it's inside my pack. So it's really, and then you're away. In fact, I probably dress a little bit hot because I wear full finger gloves and a neck scarf type thing. But I do that for skin protection. I'm sick of getting bits and pieces of me cut out every year, so I wear full finger gloves to protect my hands, because that's where they seem to be cutting them out now. And my neck, so that's it. So that's for, and I wear I'll wear a long sleeve shirt, and I'll wear it buttoned down and stuff like that. And it's more for sun protection. So yeah, it's a bit hotter, but I don't need to have any issues with melanoma, so that's why I do it.
Fair enough. Okay, so that's packs. Let's go back to the scope conversation we're having.
Scopes. I don't know what you're going to say, but scopes, think about it this way. You probably spend more time with the scope in action than you do in the rifle action.
That's an interesting statement.
That's it. The shooting part, you might look at an animal for, you line up, you're doing lots more through the scope than you are through the shooting part. So I kind of think about it that way. You actually use your scope a lot more than you do. And to be honest, if you want to argue about, power and penetration, I reckon accuracy is final, and scope is probably the thing that helps accuracy more than anything. Obviously your skill level and that, but a scope helps with the accuracy, and you're looking through it a lot more. So spend your coin on a scope.
Right. So what I was going to say about that was this is where you start getting into multiple rifles for what you're doing, because unless you've got some sort of system that allows you to swap scopes around, people tend to go, and I'm guilty of this, that's a cool scope, it's big, it's got this, telescope looking thing on the top of my first rifle, and you've got to cart that bastard around in the bush, and it doesn't wind down to the low power that you want it to. So let's talk to the new hunter about
Keep going.
Talk to the new hunter about what they should look for in a scope. Let's forget about quality for a second. Let's talk about, the power and the zoom and the, all of those sorts of features. Where would you go with that, looking back on your history?
Looking back on my history,
in this type of hunting. So we're talking state forest hunting,
Yep.
which is, usually spot and stalk.
So I started in Africa shooting a variety, and look, Africa's got a variety of species, big and small, thick bush, open plains. My first scope was a 3-9x40. I think it was probably everyone's first scope who went for a variable. I think you can't really go wrong with that. You've got a decent size objective, that 40mm. Look, in safe forest hunting, we're not really shooting that European light, which is on last light, on dark, animals crossing. Yes, you might be in some deep gullies where it might be a bit dark, darker, but I don't think you really need a 50mm or bigger objective lens, 56mm objective lens. I think it's a good entry level scope, a 3-9 that lets you turn it down to 3 when you're in the thicker stuff, and if you have to take a longer shot, for a fallow or something like that, you can crank it up to 9. I think that's a really good compromise for scope for me.
Look, there's an interesting quandary about scopes, and that is you do get what you pay for. And there's a thing about Swarovski. Everyone thinks Swarovski is not worth the money until they use them, and they go,
thanks for qualifying.
I can use that now. I'll buy. That's it. They'll go, and after they use
wreck you.
After they use Swaro, what you do is then you go home and go, okay, so what do I need to do now to buy one of those things? And you start doing the financial.
Not just the scope, but the binos as
you
well.
start doing the financial. Funny enough, with Swaro, I preferred Leica binos over Swaro binos, but I preferred Swaro scopes over Leica scopes, and I had an opportunity to test a whole range of things, and I found that for my eyes, the Leica were better a bino than the Swaros, but the Swaro was a better scope. And that's probably got something to do with one of my eyes is imbalanced, so that was it. So with magnification, I've always preferred a lower magnification scope, so I always hunted things like, 1.5 to 5, the old Leupold VX3, their dangerous game scope, which is still a great scope, the Swaro Z6 1-6, and now that I'm shooting Steiner, which I love, it's a 2-10 because they now have that 5x magnification range, but it stays on 2-3. It's got illuminated reticle. Illuminated reticles are an interesting thing. They do get taking some used to. And what it is, and you've got to kind of train yourself, is you tend to focus on that red dot more than what that red dot's focusing on. Mm-hmm. You tend to see that red and not realise it's supposed to be on something. You actually see it on the first plane. So when you look at the idea of do you get a 50 or a 56 lens, which a lot of people do because they go, it's got really great light gathering, it's great in low light. A cheap 56 will not give you the same sight picture as an expensive 1-6 with a 24mm lens up front, and that's a reality. That's a reality. So don't be don't be blinded by big numbers in the scope. You know, don't go, oh, this has got a bigger front lens than that one, so this one must be better. No, it doesn't work that way at all.
But it needs to be fit for purpose, though. You wouldn't buy a 56mm thinking, I need all this light gathering if you're hunting goats in a state forest, in my view. I think it's a waste of
That's
money.
it. I actually, I'm kind of... To me, there's very few applications where you want a 56 if you're shooting in daylight hours and you're walking.
Well, for context, I had a Swarovski 8x56 on my Tika that I had in the UK because I was shooting at last light and first light. That's why I had a 56mm, and I went for the best glass that I could get because you were shooting after dark. That's when a lot of your shooting's taking place. I've never shot after dark here. Never. You know, I usually call it before then, whereas that's what we were waiting for, was that last light to take the shot, because that's when the animals were moving.
I think the deer hunters tend to shoot that last light more than anything. Otherwise you're spotlighting and it's after dark and it doesn't matter. Or, you know, you're doing what you're doing here, and as we were talking about it before, goats are lazy, they keep bankers hours and they're up all day rather than, you know, getting up early. It's a shame to get up early when you go goat hunting, but you're excited to go. But, you know, you can wander around for a good 3 or 4 hours before you bump into them at 10 o'clock in the morning. Deer are different.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, capturing all of that light in that last 10 minutes can be all the difference.
But if you're only hunting state forest for goats, then you don't need a deer.
Definitely not. Definitely not. But I don't think there are too many people that get into state forest hunting that don't have the idea of going for the trophy game, and that's the way it is. But then there's also the thought about the scope, technical attributes. So when I was buying my last scope, everyone said go Swaro. You should go Swaro, especially the guys that had Swaro. Go Swaro. You can't go better. You know, it is what it is.
Well, they got to justify it to someone. So you got to buy it because it makes me feel better about my purchase.
I've looked through their Swaro and my Bushnell at the time, and there's no doubt one's better than the other. That's the way it was.
You should try a Swaro spotting scope.
Oh no!
Then you realise that's when you go. When you get up those 60 and 80mm lenses on the front, that's when you go. Okay,
I've got a top.
I understand.
I got Vortex's best spotting scope, and like I can only imagine how much better the Swaro one would be. But anyway, that aside, I was in the market for a new scope for the 7mm, and I'm a tech head.
Yep, me too.
I wanted the technical scope. I wanted the auto ranging, you know, Bluetooth connected, you know, modern scope. I didn't want the traditional scope that everyone's had for, you know, however many years. I wanted to try out something different, and I had my reasons for it. And I was talking about those before with the mentor hunting and needing to be able to acquire distance quicker than, you know, whatever, if something was in trouble. And so I was, after one of the trips to New Zealand, I was really interested in the 6OS scope, because that's what it did. And one of the guys that was on the trip out there managed to take a nice red stag because he was able to range it effectively with that scope. And yes, you can do that manually. You can do all of those sorts of things, but it takes time. It takes a lot more. It's like reloading, right? You get to know your ballistics, you get to know your scope, you know. But committing all of that to memory for a hunter that might hunt once a year, twice, 3 times a year, maybe the season, the rut, the raw, they're not going to remember that. You have to go back to a book, try and remember how to use their scope, the ballistics calculations. You don't commit that stuff to memory for life, I don't think, unless you're doing it pretty frequently. It's a difficult set of calculations to remember, MOA and all of that stuff. So I wanted to be able to do that, and it's been a great scope, and it's got the Illuminated Reticle. Get that right, you get in trouble. I have to tick the box that says not fit for children if I say that other word. But the good thing about it is it's adjustable, so I can turn the brightness of that illumination right down or right up depending on the light. But it doesn't collect light the same as the Swaro does, because it's got another pane of glass in there, which is where all the LEDs go. Right, it's the way it operates. So it is limited in its light gathering capability compared to the Swaro, but compared it to a friend of mine's Myopter, it's on par. That's pretty good.
And from a technical perspective, is it intuitive? Could someone who's not a tech head use that sort of scope and system?
If you were to pick up my rifle and just want to shoot it, knowing that it was 0 to 200, you would know in a state forest that you could shoot anything by pointing at the game and shooting it, because you don't really need to adjust up to 200. You know, you've got 2 inches maybe of difference.
Especially with 7 mil.
With 7 mil, right? If that. If you wanted to then shoot it to 300, 400, 500, 600 meters comfortably, you could do that.
Okay.
Right? All I would have to do is range the target, and the holdover dot moves.
Right. So
And it gives you an
very
angle point.
intuitive. So for
Very,
someone
very.
who's not a tech head,
You don't need, no, if I hand it to you and say, hey, shoot, and I'll give you the holdover point, off you go, piece of cake. Setting it up to start with, you go through quite a bit of technical stuff. You know, you get your factory rounds or your hand loads, depending on what you're doing. You put those into the app. You pair that app with your rangefinder and your scope, and you go to the range and you shoot 100 meters. And you say, okay, well, I'm going to zero at 100. I zero at 2. So I zero at 200. Then you shoot 100. You range 100, and it'll give you the holdover slightly lower. It'll hit it. You'll say, yes, that's accurate. No adjustment required. You'll go to 300. Shoot it. If it's 2 centimeters off in a group, you tell the app that it's 2 centimeters low and left, and it auto adjusts to you, which is fantastic.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right, so it calibrates to you. But you can put all the, like, it's got a bullet profile. You can go, I'm using Hornady SST 160 grain rounds, and it has the full ballistics just pumped straight into the app. You don't have to go and load it all up, so it's got all that stuff.
Yeah, Burris.
Eliminator.
No,
Yeah.
Veracity.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Burris Veracity has the app where you do the same thing. So, but the app had the reticle. Obviously it's a patterned reticle, and so you go to the app and you tell it what ammo you're using, and it's got a huge list of factory ammo, and you give it a number of conditions, and it also and then it basically goes, okay, here is your reticle. Here's 0, 100, 200, 300. What's that mean? So it tells you that on the reticle. Steiner have a similar thing with their new. They've got a new reticle which is 100, 200, 300, 400, and it's also got the windage on it.
Yeah.
It's
So
pretty.
this has that. I can turn all of that on, or I can turn it off. So I just run with the holdover dot. I turn all the noise off.
Yeah.
Or I could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 holdover dots inside the scope at any point in time, and I can just move it up and down as I want to. That works really well, and it's got windage and leveling on it, so I know if I'm off camber.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. Something that I found really bizarre, though, it had an ethics setting. An ethics setting. So you yourself decide that I'm not comfortable shooting out past 600.
Oh, okay.
And you put that into your app, and if you're ranging an animal that's past your ethical comfort zone, it won't let you shoot.
Wow.
It won't give you a holdover.
It won't give you a holdover. You could still shoot it if you wanted to. But
Yeah, you could guesstimate,
Which
like
is
anyone
quite
else could.
unethical, really.
Which is unethical. Yeah. But for them to think about that, I thought that was a bit bizarre.
yeah,
But
I guess that is good.
I turned it off.
But I've heard that in some, for instance, US states, they've actually banned this. I think the electronic scopes.
Oh, they're banning in the US. They're banning in a lot of states now game trails.
Yeah, game cameras. Yeah, anything that gives you that
extra edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think we'll ever run into that issue here.
Well, this is the thing, right? I hadn't considered the way that some of these people were using the trail cams, though. So I use a trail cam. I assume the same way as Mark does. We go out into a place that we're scoping out. We put the cameras out, and we go back each week and we have a look. Or you might get a really, a more expensive one that sends you the photo at home, and you can get the photo. What I hadn't considered was I'm sitting down the track. It walks past, takes a photo of a stag, sends me the photo 100 metres further down the track. On the spot, I go, that's the deer I'm looking for, and I know he's coming. I hadn't actually considered people using him as Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
Okay, that's different.
I want to trade up to the cell the cell connected version. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't. No.
So I can be waiting down the back having my
That's
latte.
right. That's right. Yeah, you can be literally be at your car in your portable beanbag or whatever it is with your feet up watching YouTube, And he goes, oh, bing. Oh, it's there now. I'll go.
Yep.
I'll just sneak
Oh,
down to my
it's a
blind and
sparker,
pop it.
100%.
Yeah. That's not what I thought at all.
I hadn't heard that use case, but it makes a lot of sense that people would do that.
Wow, that is different. Yeah.
That's my piece on technical scopes. If you like that sort of stuff, good. If you're into longer range shooting, you probably want to be more comfortable with your ballistics and understanding that anyway.
Yeah.
So relying on the technology is probably not the best answer. For me, like I've been overseas to hunt where I've needed long distance a couple of times. It was a real benefit, really was, and gives you the comfort to know that it works. And like I've got some photos or some video, slow motion video, of the shots that were taken through this rifle, and the height was absolutely perfect. It was only the windage that was slightly up, so that, you know, the couple of rounds buzzed straight past the nose, which was in line with exactly where it needed to be, at 480 odd meters or something.
It's a long shot.
Yeah, and across gullies, man. So the wind is crazy.
Okay, so how long have we been going for?
Hour and a half,
Nearly. Is it time to talk about pants?
Oh, well, we've done rifles, we've done packs, we've done scopes.
Bino
I
rigs.
think we've
Bino
sort of
rigs.
done bino rigs, and we've, you know, rangefinders, just don't go El Cheapo. You can get them from Aldi, but don't. We've talked about a cool way to use trail cams.
Yeah, we did.
Okay,
There's the learning.
let's talk about clothing.
Sure, let's talk about clothing.
Mark's been waiting for this one.
Okay. Clothing. So, Jonathan, what's your advice for clothing?
I'm going to stay away from pants for the moment, Mark, because I'm going to leave that one for you. For me personally, and I think this goes back to what you said as well, is around sun-safe clothing. I'm pretty fair-skinned, and I've had a few spots that's been cut out of me. So I think, you know, what you said around wearing long sleeves, sun protection clothing, really important. I wear, you know, a hat. I always put sunscreen on. I wear the neck scarf as well, which is a camo one, just to protect the neck. I always wear longs, no matter how hot I am. I make sure that it's breathable clothing, and just to, you know, protect the skin. I think with the climate that we've got here in Australia, that's really important. From a pants perspective, I usually wear my my Hunters Element pants, and they've treated me really, really well. I've hunted everywhere with them, but they kind of let me down a little bit today. No fault of their own, really, but I think the conditions here and the countryside just beat them a little bit.
Did you read the label?
I didn't. No.
What is this?
You know how Hunter's Element come with like 10 labels on
Yes,
every garment?
yes.
One of them says, "Do not wear in Australian seedy conditions."
Really?
No.
I know they have like really weird labels. Like I got one of my jackets or something that says like, you know,
Made from 65,000 bottles.
no, those ones. That shits me. That stuff. No, it's like, you know, keeps you steaming warm or stuff like that. You know, it's what does it say? Something silly like that. It's about, you know, it's going to
Marketing,
keep
mate.
you warm or something like that. But not like it's going to keep you warm. It's got to be kind of like this funky warm, like steaming or something like that, or howling winds or something like that, which probably is relevant to where it was made, because, you know, the only time I really wear my Hunter's Element puffy is England.
You need to spend more time in Victoria.
I do. I do. I'd like to chase Samba, and I've got the jacket for it.
Look, I like their gear.
Yeah.
Most of my equipment is Hunter's Element stuff. I've had various different other brands. I like it because, well, I like to pick a brand and stick with it,
I'm the same.
because you know their sizes. You can order it online. It's very consistent. I've never found that, you know, one size pants fits this time and it doesn't next time, and that's really important if you're just going to buy it online and not have to muck around. I find that the quality of it's reasonable. I've had a couple of bits of gear fail, but nothing serious. And they've got everything for all conditions, I find. But
Look, it's never let me down. I've not had a piece of kit fail yet, and what happened today, it didn't fail. It kept me.
No, it actually had gathering
Well,
capabilities.
it's a feature.
It features a camo, but 3D. It's like a ghillie
So
suit.
it's a ghillie suit. Yeah, it's what happened. I hate hunting in long pants. It just shits me to tears. It's either shorts. I mean, shorts, and by the time you're wearing Gators, you're pretty much in longs, minus maybe a little bit. In winter, I wear Hunters Element thermals under my shorts.
Yep.
For me, it's about being less restricted. I find that these style pants that you're wearing, if you're climbing stuff and trying to get up on things, you get restricted in the material. And I find with thermals and shorts, you just don't. It's just freer. So I prefer that. It gets wet, it dries faster. I don't know. It's just the way I do it. It's the way a lot of us in New Zealand tended to do it before. And I just cottoned onto that, and I've never changed.
Do you wear the Hunters Element Gators?
Yes, but not the snake ones.
Okay.
So they brought out, I've been meaning to do a review on them, a pair of Gators that I bought, that they've only just brought out. Awesome. Absolutely awesome pair of Gators. So they, it's a neoprene material, and they're basically, yay long. For those that are listening, not seeing,
That'll be about
25 centimetres long.
Just under a foot long.
Say. They're quite tight. You stretch them around across at the top of your boot, and zip them up, and they form a seal around your ankle. So they only go up about that high, up your ankle. They form a seal. So I went into a river, and what I've never had in a Gator is that waterproofing. But I walked through a river up to my knee, and I got no water in the top of my boot because the neoprene sealed it off like a wetsuit.
Yeah.
Reasonably tight. I thought, when I first put them on, I thought this is going to be a problem. It's going to be too hot. Didn't even notice them all day. They don't collect seeds, and they do a great job. But they're not snake gators. But I've never really wanted to wear snake gators.
Okay. Look, I've got some Hunters Element gear, so I shouldn't, pretend I don't. I got two jackets, and I got the spur trousers, and another set. And that's my winter gear that I wear when we go down below Tamworth. So that's what I wear down there, generally. I had a pair of their boots. I have a pair of their boots. Unfortunately, they're just they're not so great. So
I've heard that a bit. Yep.
Yeah, they're just not so good. But for me, I've gone through most of the major brands trying to find gear, and I actually don't wear camo. I wear solid colours.
Yeah, I'm moving away from camo.
I wear this kind of coyote tan and green or browns and stuff like that. And I've got a Swazi top, and it's green. It's just a solid green. And even my Hunters Element stuff, I don't have. They're the green ones. I don't have the solid green rather than the camo ones. But I just don't wear camo. My pack's not camo. I'm just not a camo. I prefer a solid colour with this stuff. Gators, I've got Hunters Element Gators. I've got they're quite a tight fitting one. They kind of have that wrap in them. They're a good gator.
But I think the one thing that I like to say to people, don't scrimp on, is wet weathers. And we've bashed Hunters Element only a little bit. We may say that some of the gear is not super good, but we're still buying it.
Yep.
And I'm still using it, and I still quite like it. It's good gear. Years ago, I bought a Swazi anorak. Just to, it's like a tent. You can survive in those things. They're just the best on the market, in my opinion, as far as wet weather coats go. It's an anorak, goes down to your knees, cinches at the waist. Excellent piece of gear. I've had it for years. Not even the mice can kill it, which is great. But, and I say don't scrimp on wet weathers. I have the Hunters Element top of the range wet weather pants, and I was super surprised how good they were. I wore them in Victoria in some wicked weather. There's some funny video of Missy and I hunkered down under a tree in an absolute deluge, and it was fine. I didn't get a drop of water on me, and they came with some really good features. Like, they were really well designed at the knees so that you can move really freely. I never sweated in them. They come with suspenders, So even though you're buying bigger pants, because they've got to go over what you're wearing, you don't wear them instead of pants.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to put them on quickly over your boots, over everything. Suspenders go over the top of what you're wearing, and your jacket comes on really comfortable. So I highly rate those. They've been really good.
Yeah, look, wet weather gear is something that I'm not particularly au fait with. You know, mostly hunting in Queensland and New South Wales, you get wet. But certainly when you get into that situation where you've got to give that consideration, then you need good gear. And you're right, you know, we have been having a bit of a dig at Hunters Element, but my wet weather gear or my winter gear is Hunters Element gear, and in fact my go-to wet weather coat or jacket, whatever you want to call it, is Hunters Element. It's one of the soft shell jackets. It's actually really, really good. I mean, it might not be great in certain levels of rain, but it's if you're hunting winter and it's raining, it's certainly a good gear. And as I said, there's two jackets that I take to England, and they're both Hunters Element. One's the puffy and one's the soft shell. But I mean, again, you got to think about it. It's not something that we're tested with generally. So when you get into those conditions where that is a reality, you've got to think about what gear you need to take there, because, you know.
Yep, very true. We were doing a lot of New Zealand stuff and then a lot of Victoria stuff back to back, so we were using the same gear pretty much the whole time, maybe one less layer of thermal underneath between the two, but it was really important to have that sort of equipment. And like I say, it's easier to bag Hunters Element because it's so mainstream now.
Yeah.
Like it's easy to get.
We should probably apologise there. We've had some technical difficulties, so there might be a little issue of continuity there, but we're getting around it. And but talking about conditions and being ready for the conditions, and you know, you go into subalpine or alpine New Zealand, get your gear ready. However, we were having this conversation today. It gets cold here at Severn.
Yeah, and I've been caught out here.
It gets cold here. Some of the coldest I've ever been is here and in other state forests, because technically I probably wasn't prepared for it.
Yeah, so
it wasn't like the coldest absolute.
Yeah.
It's probably the coldest I felt because I wasn't prepared. One year we had pretty heavy frost down here, and we were sleeping under a tarp, and you know, it was cold. There was one time we hunted Pilliga in the winter, and it was cold. And again, you know, it was challenging. So you know, you can get caught out in probably the least expecting places, and of course with summer storms and the way the temperature can drop, summer storms, that certainly will be challenging for at least a period of time.
I think you can get caught out anywhere now. I mean, the climate change, believe it or don't believe it, if this is climate change, this type of storm, like the wet weather we've had this year, could be a cycle, sure. But I set up here a month ago, and it just absolutely hammered down with rain one afternoon, and we went from being like sweltering 40 degrees to looking for jackets and clothes because we just weren't prepared for it, and it was really cold. Same thing happened at Pilliga when it really deluged down. It's funny, we were talking about ponchos in our, I don't know, were we talking about ponchos on
Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
We were, yeah. We were talking about ponchos. But when you're hunting in 40 degree weather, when it rains, you welcome it. You don't even go diving for that poncho. You just stand there and get wet because, oh my goodness, it's just a relief. But then all of a sudden you're freezing because, you know, you're just not used to it. So yeah, I've camped down in the valley below where we are now and woken up to just ridiculous frosts. Yeah. So it gets seriously cold in here.
Yeah. And one way that I've worked around that is I've actually generally bring a pretty highly, as in low temperature rated sleeping bag, and I just unzip it or zip it type thing, you know, because you know, it does sneak up on you. And I mean, this morning there was fresh, and there was a bit of a wind chill, and it was fresh up here, so it can catch you out.
But it's a challenge buying equipment, I guess, the story there. because you can arm yourself for Queensland summers. You can live in Brisbane and buy what you think you need, then come up on the range and need a lot cooler gear, then travel into Glen Innes, Nundle, not Severn, sorry, Nundle and Hanging Rock and Tugalo and places like that. It snows there during the rut, or can do, and then when you venture further south and into the snowy highlands, then it's really, really cold. So you just got to think about what you've got.
Yep.
And it doesn't all have to be camo. Your warm gear can be orange, it can be blue, it doesn't matter. It's really there to make you live. Yes, it's nice to be able to have the right equipment to stay on the hill and keep hunting, but sometimes just get out there and do it with gear that's going to keep you safe.
Yeah, look, one of the warmest tops I got is, check blue. It's a swan dry.
A swanee, yeah.
Yeah.
A wool coat, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
The same sort of thing goes for boots, and not on the warmth side, but I went through a process of trying to choose boots, and something I didn't consider was the type of sole that you got on your boot. I was getting into stalking and bow hunting, and I wanted a really soft-soled, gave a lot of feedback when you were standing on things, and I went to a specific, I can't even remember the name of them in Brisbane, but they were a boot company. They sold a lot of footwear for defence personnel and tactical people, police, things like that. And I went in there with a specific purpose to buy tactical boots that were soft-soled and all those sorts of things. And they sat me down, they talked about what I was going to do, and you've got to match all of the things you want to do and try and find a middle ground that's going to suit you. But what they told me, because we were carrying packs, and I'm a heavy guy, and you're loading more stuff on your back, you need a solid sole boot that doesn't really give you a lot of feedback, which is a shame. But if you're carrying a lot of weight on your back and you don't have a solid sole boot, you'll get bruised feet.
Yeah, you can hurt your feet.
You really hurt your feet. And if you decide that you've got a boot that's suited for, stalking around nice and quietly and in soft terrain, then it's not going to work for you when you jump overseas and go and climb the Alps. And you're on rock and shale and that sort of stuff all day. And I found that out over there on the hill. I had a reasonably new pair of boots that were nice and soft and squishy underneath and very, very comfortable. There was no sole left on those boots when I got home. They wore through to the steel. So I had to up what I was doing. So there's a real trade-off in the boot, I think.
Oh, most definitely. And so I've got two very different types of boots here. I've got typical hiking style boots. Got them right on now. The Italian Zamberlins. But I've got my, I got my moccasin boots.
Oh, your moccasins.
I'll be wearing them the next couple of days.
So these are the fancy Zamberlins.
These are my fancy Zamberlins because I like Italian.
Can you lift your
boots.
foot any further for the viewers? There we go. Fancy. That's the sole of it anyway.
So they run the Vibram sole.
How do you find the sole?
Look, these are.
Are they resold or did they come with those soles?
No, that's the sole though that they that's how they came out of the box. It's a funny thing keeping quiet with you, and it's got a lot more to do with the operator than the shoe.
I won't buy anything with a Vibram sole.
I don't mind a Vibram sole. I seem to be able to work. Can I walk quietly in
Can
these?
I look at your boot? Lift your foot up
quiet,
again.
Yeah. I think it's difficult in the
So,
conditions we had.
I tend to find that and I might be wrong here, but just my observation is the Vibram sole is glued on. There's no stitching, right? So it can come away from the base quite easily.
Well,
the other thing is
technically
it's slippery as shit on rocks.
It can come away, I suppose, but I've never had a pair come away on a good pair of boots. And the other thing is stitched soles are harder to keep waterproof over time.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you've got holes in them.
I've had more failures with stitched than glued.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I stopped buying anything with Vibram sole just because, firstly, the slipperiness.
Yeah.
And then I just had a ton of boots just fail.
So I've got a pair of Scarpers, which also has a Vibram sole, but it's a completely different.
Yeah.
Glued as well.
It's also glued, and they're super comfortable, and they've not let me down yet.
Yeah, so comfort was a thing. Like, that's really important. Comfort's important. But having that suck off the bottom of your boot when you're in wet conditions.
If it failed to me, I think I would.
It's conditions, right? In Australia, there's nothing wrong with it. We're gonna see these mighty moccasins in a second. I've been looking forward to this. Mark wears slippers when he hunts. My granddad wore moccasins.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just personal preference.
It is personal
I had
preference.
scarpas, not the same as these, but I wore a scarpa overseas, New Zealand. I was wet for 2 weeks. The soles pulled away from the boot in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But I'm taking them into really shit conditions, and you get, they're designed for different things. Here's the moccasin. There you go, moccasin. They're not quite as moccasin as I thought they were going to be.
That's more of a boot than a moccasin.
Yeah,
in my view.
I thought they'd have folded over at the top with bits of wool and stuff.
A couple of tassels on the front,
So in
like those little Italian slip-on shoes. So okay,
that's a boot.
it is a boot, but what it's got is it's
not a tight around your foot boot.
see how it's got this kind of different. So it doesn't have the rolled leather. It's sectioned, which makes them okay. So the benefit of these things if it's not hill country, you can just wear these forever.
Yeah,
they are so comfortable, and they are quiet.
Pretty worn out.
Yeah, they are. I've worn these a lot. The downside of them is that they're not so good in hill country because you can't really tighten them up on your foot. You can't really cinch them like you can with a proper pair of hiking boots. So that's the trade-off. But for a place like Severn, Pilliga, flat country, these things are just wonderfully comfortable, and they don't, you don't get, tired feet, as it were. They are just very, very comfortable, and I found that they're incredibly quiet, and they've got a level of waterproofing to them. They've got a level of protection, so they're not delicate by any means. And I think I've had them for about 7 years now, and they've been to a number of places. Haven't been to England.
No.
So when I was in England, we mainly wore Wellington.
Yeah, mud boots.
Yeah, mud boots, Wallies. Because it's so wet and cold, and I had a pair of thermal boots, and my feet get cold. So I like something that's warm. But over there, I will really thick socks, thermal socks and thermal boots. Yeah. Thermal wellies.
See, their class is what Yanks class is an upland boot. So that's, walking with your shotgun, either with or without your dog, driving quail, like around here at Pilliga. Sorry, Severn. Lots of quail here.
That's boots. Good.
That's boots.
What have we missed?
Don't know.
That's about it. It's not it. It's definitely not it, but it's a good cover of the basics.
Sure. Can't think of anything off the top of my head. That should get you nowhere. Not going. I suppose there's a whole raft of tents, sleeping mats, sleeping bags, which we'll do.
Camper trailers. With heaters.
Yeah, 3-star, 4-star hotel.
Yes, there is, and I've again, being a gearhead, I tried a whole bunch of them, and we'll do a whole nother video, I think, on sleep systems.
Yep.
Because I went from cheap tent to more expensive tent. I went the full Hennessy hammock, super shelter system. Then we went overseas, and we spoke to the search and rescue people that my uncle knew over there, and he was joining us on the hunt. We asked their advice as to what type of tent we should be buying. They recommended one tent and one tent only as the survivor, the one that doesn't get blown off the hill, and we all bought them. And I'll go through that, I think, at a later video. But yeah, we've gone through a lot of those, and now I'm trialing the Elton Good stuff, the ultra lightweight, so that I can go the extra ridge and the extra little bit further. So I've gone from, the full tent to now almost under a kilo. I've got a fly, a tub type ground sheet, and a mozzie net.
Yep.
And you just throw your sleeping bag in, and that's lighter than a hammock. Hammocks are actually surprisingly heavy. You wouldn't think so, but they are. But
well,
anyway,
I've just bought a heap of, not a heap, but 2 new tents, a new sleeping, one of the self-inflating mattresses and a new sleeping bag. So I've gone through that process myself. Basically, a process for renewal.
Yeah.
And also thought about with my boys and stuff like that. So yeah, I reckon we do sleep gear next.
Yeah, it'd be a good one. I thought the hammock was the best idea in the world. But I'm
can't stand hammocks. I hate them.
Well, I did hate them, and now I love them again, and then I hated them, and I love them again. So one thing that I can suggest that everyone that decides they want to go hunting in the bush in a tent is learn to sleep on your back.
Yes,
absolutely learn to sleep on your back. I know you're going to snore. It's just life. Sad one. Apologise to your wife now, but say it's part of hunting. And hopefully you'll get away with that as a comment. If you sleep on your back, you have a much more comfortable night in a tent, with a thin mattress than you do lying on your side. It's just a fact. And you get a better night's sleep out of it. So once you've learned how to do that, hammock sleeping is a lot easier. It took me 3 weeks to learn to sleep on my back. And I had some pretty uncomfortable nights learning to do it. But in 3 weeks, every night now, I'm asleep on my back in a couple of minutes. I'm done. I'm out. And it's the best thing. Yep. Now lying on my side is more uncomfortable. I don't feel comfortable doing that anymore.
Used to it.
Yeah, so I'm used to what I'm doing. But now, I'll go to sleep in a swag and I've only got a thin mattress. Your weight's dispersed across your whole width of your body and you're just more comfortable. In a hammock, you've got to sleep on your back. You can sleep on your side, but sleeping on your back in a hammock, sideways across the hammock is also the trick. If you sleep lengthways down the hammock, you're going to get cramps. You have to spin sideways and sleep across it, not directly across it, but you need to sleep on an angle across your hammock and you get a much nicer sleep. My problem with the hammock was down the hill here, way down there. I was sleeping in my hammock and at 2 o'clock in the morning I was nudged awake by a cow. And I didn't know what it was at the time. And if you can think, me in a hammock, as I was 130 kilos of bloke at the time,
so you're some pig
and something nudged me awake and kept nudging me, and it didn't make a noise. And I was that dude in the cartoon with legs and arms and shit and spinning and going around in circles until I hit the ground and untangled myself. And it was a mob of cows. I'd camped across their movement path, and they weren't impressed with that. And that freaked me right out.
What's that thing that they hang? It's this for the buffalo fly, for the cattle.
Oh, like a harness?
No, like you'll see if they've got. I think it's for buffalo fly, but they'll put them in a paddock. So basically, you'll see them. They're this black tube that they have that has the treatment for the fly, and the cows rub themselves on it.
Oh, that might have been.
So they probably thought it was like one of those.
I tell you though, far out, because there was no getting your torch.
No.
By the time I'd spun around about 6 times, I couldn't get into the hammock. So I was in the dark, floundering around with something bumping into me. I was pretty scared. It was different.
Proper cartoon moment, that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can imagine.
That's just crazy.
So we'll probably end there.
I reckon we're done.
We'll do a demo on sleep systems sometime very soon.
Sure.
All right.
Well, that's our first
On-site.
Yeah, on-site outdoor broadcast.
And our first return guest. Thanks for
And our first return guest.
Thank you very much for having me.
So there we go, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm not sure of the rationale discussed. Probably
it was gear.
Wide-ranging discussion.
It was all about gear, and lots of people have asked about gear. So
lots of people have asked gear.
So tomorrow morning, enjoy your hunt. Don't wake me up. I'm going to sleep in, and then I'm going to go back to work.
Thought you're going to be taking this out.
No, I'm not permitted. I can't. All the spots are taken, so I can't go hunting with you. I will get up and go and get a coffee on my way home and get back to work. But enjoy your hunting. You've got 3 days left, and hopefully bins full of fresh goat meat.
Hopefully tomorrow we can find a few.
And if you haven't seen it, I've posted the recipe up. Give it a go. It's bloody unreal.
I saw the recipe.
All right.
Okay.
We're out. We're done.
Cool. Thank you.
See you later.